and then I can just look over your shoulders and make sure you're reading from your notes. So I am going to just let you guys introduce yourselves. I think it's more interesting to hear from you. And that is our first question that everyone is dying to know is, who are you actually? Why are you up here? What do you do? And then kind of with our theme is data collection, what type of data do you collect?
We might have to circle back to me, but my name is Kade Casciato. I manage Ciel Cheval Vineyards, Red Mountain ABA out in Benton City. Very active in research and education both. We do a lot of extension work. We do a lot of our own field trials. We work very closely with the universities, WSU, Oregon State University, UC Davis. We work with a whole host of other industry partners for beta testing, new technologies. If there's a new emerging technology, typically those companies on a commercial scale will end up at our door first and will, I guess, make a determination of whether that is going to be commercially viable, if it's going to be, really driven down and backed in science. And then, so a whole host of things. I won't take up more time, but we'll get back to the data that we collect, because they told me to keep it short, so I only brought 4 pages worth of what we collect.
Thanks, Kade. I'm Catherine Jones. I'm a crop consultant at Wilbur, Ellis. The primary crop that I work with is wine grapes. I'd say 99.9% of my business is working with wine grapes. My philosophy as a crop consultant is soil health and plant health. I do have a master's degree in soil science, so I think that's what helped lead me to that philosophy. My working with my customers fully revolves around not just crop protection, but how do we keep these plants healthy as possible to increase their longevity and improve wine quality at the end of the day. I think we'll get into our next question. I know has to do with data that we collect, so I'll pass it to Reid, and then we'll move on.
Giving away my secret of getting the questions beforehand.
What's up, guys? My name is Reid Wilson. I manage Hedges Vineyard, and we are an organic and regenerative organic certified vineyard. My main focus has been in really understanding the vineyard. So it's 40 years old. We're located on Red Mountain, and I would say there's been a lot of history that's happened on that vineyard. And so this past year, really my first year at Hedges, has just been trying to understand the soils, right? I'm a firm believer, and that's where everything starts and ends. We also practice some biodynamic techniques as well. And so I very much believe in the science of monitoring, but I also believe in the magic of nature and just spending time myself monitoring with my own eyes, right? My own hands, and trying to understand really what are we doing and why are we doing it.
That's great. So you can keep that microphone if you want. Sure. Chris read my mind and handed me one magically. So that goes into our next one is how do you use your data to make your management decisions, particularly for soil health? So each of you kind of have ranges from crop consultants. You see all types of vineyards. You have a regenerative biodynamic one, and then just kind of are you sustainable wild?
No, sustainable wild and salmon safe.
Okay, yeah.
We are not organic biodynamic.
Right.
We are conventional, but we try to be very thoughtful in our approaches.
Which is totally why we picked 3 different people, right? We planned this. So we want to know is with these different vineyards and these different approaches, what do you see? How do you use your data to make these decisions, especially for soil health? And anyone can jump in.
Go for it.
Cool. I'll go for it. So really, I'll take soil samples every couple of years. I back that up with plant tissue samples at bloom and veraison. And also we'll take some water samples as well. We're KID, so sometimes it feels a little bit silly to take those samples as KID water changes every single day. So we'll do one at the beginning.
For those who don't know online, what is the KID for the irrigation?
Kennewick Irrigation District. So we are ditch fed water. We also have some well water as well, but we paid for the KID water, so we're going to use the KID water. And so with that, it's really going back to kind of starting at Hedges. I could really see some issues within the terroir, we can call it, which that might go into one of our other questions of what is the challenge of monitoring soils, right? It's like, you need the terroir, but at the same time, what are the farming practices and how are they changing that terroir is kind of a question that kind of repeats in my mind. And so through some of these the soil sampling and just kind of my own observations, it really pushed me in an interesting direction, which was focusing on solving the issue in a bunch of different ways. And I would say that's kind of one of the good and bad things about practicing biodynamic and organic farming. In my opinion, you really you can't have one answer, right? And if you feel like you got one answer, then you're probably wrong. So for me, it was kind of seeing really sodic soils, pH about 9. And all of that is very much affecting vine nutrients and very much affecting wine quality. So I did a deep dive into native plants and understanding biodiversity. And I'll be honest, Red Mountain was pretty easy to think about native plants because it's a desert, nothing really grows there. So we only have like sagebrush, rabbitbrush, and some bunch grasses. So I worked with Tom in the back. Shout out to Tom. Woo, love that guy. And I was able to get some grant money to plant some native cover crops. We planted 43 acres of native cover crop, and we also got 180 sagebrush plugs and 80 Great Basin wild rye plugs, and more to come. If Tom can hook me up with some more money, we'll see. So the thought of that is Red Mountain in itself is just 100% monoculture, monocrop, and we're all suffering the same problems, right? We all are kind of fighting leaf roll. We're all fighting mealybugs, and leaf hoppers, in my opinion, organically speaking, are horrendous. So with that, it was really kind of identifying these problems. And again, through monitoring, but also just kind of seeing that and talking to my neighbors. And so from there, I devised this plan of bringing in these cover crops, helping with biodiversity, and then also sheep grazing, right? So in a couple of weeks here, we're going to be bringing in sheep in the vineyard, and sheep, the urine and the manure, and even the saliva of the sheep really help with just kind of lowering that pH in the soil. And so in my belief, if I can kind of come at it in a couple multi-tiered approach with cover cropping, with sheep grazing, it can really kind of help me understand what's working and what's not working, right? And also with the cover crop, hopefully we bring in some beneficial insects. We'll see. I'm hoping some green lacewings. That'd be great. And we'll also be drone releasing some insects as well. And so with that, it's like I'm trying to create these farm systems that are all kind of in-house, so to speak. And that's kind of the really great thing about biodynamics is it forces the farmer to look at what they have, look at the land that they've got. And if you're ever driving on the highway and you look at Red Mountain, we're kind of the only ones with trees, right? So I've got a lot of trees in a desert, which doesn't really make sense, but we have them. And so I've gone through and really removed a lot of limbs, a lot of branches, and have mulched just an immaculate amount of trees. And so with that, we use our pumice, and then we also kind of truck in some already made compost, and then I've created compost within that, right? Just to kind of hold me over for this year, because finding organic certified compost challenging, and finding organic certified manure even more challenging, right? So that's was also the impetus for bringing in sheep. I will be collecting that manure, and then it'll be 100% in-house compost, right? To kind of fight some of this stuff that I'm seeing in the soil. I'm a big believer in organic matter, and what that can do to the soil is pretty incredible. And then also, there's some word of kind of maybe KID or irrigation being maybe cut off early. So that's a bit of a fear of mine. Obviously, we need water, and so I'm going to be kind of looking into mulching and seeing what I can do on mulching on a pretty grand scale, right? We have 105 acres, So I really need to kind of pick and choose what's going to work and what's not going to work, in the sense of what are those blocks that if we cut off water, I'm going to be hurting even more so, right? So I'm very much a big believer in using that compost and using that mulch, but also I really suggest and I'm going to take soil samples in the virgin landscape, in the native landscape, to see which these soils, like what should they be, right? And a lot of times when you're reading the textbooks, you see the optimal pH range for grapevines. I don't think 9 is optimal, but again, I still think it's important to see what is that, what is that like naturally, and then just try the best I can to get as close as I can to that, right? We're not supposed to have grapevines on Red Mountain, but we do, right? So I also have to have a little bit of take that with a grain of salt of, with bringing in native plants as well, right? So with that, I'm also going to be doing some more cover cropping with purple prairie clover, which I would say is not necessarily native to this area, but more of the Pacific Northwest. And then again, a lot of this is that we just planted it, we just put in all these cover crops, and so we did a lot of monitoring beforehand, and then we'll kind of do phases of this to see, like, is this worth it? Is this working? And then from there, I could really dial in even more so my compost program, my nutrient program in general, right? And seeing what I can do with that.
Great. So real quick, how many of you know what biodynamic is? Can you explain in 1 or 2 sentences what biodynamic is?
Sure. Just a side note, we are not going to be certified anymore. So
Okay.
I'm on the biodynamic kind of frame, but also I'm not in some ways, but I'll explain it in a very unbiased way. Biodynamics is basically using plants to heal plants, right? You have a series of preparations, and that is kind of the keystone of biodynamics. And these preparations, most commonly the cow horn preparation, which is, and by the way, all these preparations are numbered, and none of the numbers necessarily make sense, but this is number 500. And so you would take a cow horn from a producing cow, female cow. What's the name of that?
No.
Yeah, just a cow. And you thank you. Thank you. So you take that horn, you fill that with manure, and then you'd bury that in the fall equinox, and then dig that up in the spring equinox. And then the thought behind that would be the kind of like the downward motion of planting or putting something in the ground, and then letting that kind of work within itself. What comes from that, the manure turns into this beautiful kind of humic, and it's got like a very interesting kind of smell to it. It's not a manure smell, and then you spray that out at a very homeopathic rate, which people in biodynamics do not like to use the word homeopathic, but a little bit of an opinion of mine. So anyways, it's this was invented over 100-something years ago by a gentleman named Rudolf Steiner from Austria, and he gave a series of lectures, and those lectures were talking about that. How can we use plants to heal our own plants, and then also using very much the lunar cycle in when to plant, when to harvest, when to be in the field, when to be out of the field. And in my opinion, the biodynamics was really a small scale thing that Rudolf Steiner was trying to do. He was really focusing on 3 to 5 acres. He was not focusing on 105 acres that we have, right? He wanted a community of people to be working together, which I very much believe in. I use the biodynamics in the sense of I enjoyed the principle of using what you have, right? They're very strict. Demeter is the certifying body for biodynamics. And I have to have all my inputs within a certain mile radius, and they all have to be mined essentially from the earth. So in the sense of a spray program, that can be challenging. There's not too much difference in the spray program from an organic to a biodynamic spray program, but as far as fertilization and what I can use for fertilizers, that was a bit of a hindrance. And I actually saw more of an issue on the winemaking side of things than I did in the vineyard.
Perfect. Thank you. So turn it over to Catherine. You probably see a lot of different data collection.
Yeah. So for soils, I think most of us are used to collecting soils and then running a complete soil test, which tells us what's in soil solution and then what's in that labile pool that any plant could then pull from in terms of nutrition. I'm very used to pulling that at Wilbur, Ellis, the district that I'm in. We work with a lot of tree fruit, and over the last many years, we our agronomy team has I don't want to say developed, but has implemented other soil testing protocols that now I'm starting to use on the grape side. One of them, saturated paste. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of that. It's you take your soil and your irrigation water, you mix it together and then run your test off that. It tells you, big thing that it tells you is what is your water contributing to your soil in terms of the nutrients that are available. It also is a really good indicator of electrical conductivity, so the salts, the acidity and salinity of your soil. So it's what I like that test for, is it's a really good indicator of how salty your soil is. And then we have a test that we call our REN test. It's an organic acid extraction test. And so what we do is, well, not when I say we, I mean the lab. The lab takes that soil, drops it to a pH of about a 4.4, using certain organic acids to mimic what the plant root or exudates are doing to the soil. So that's telling us what exactly is the root getting from the soil. So that's a really interesting test. I like doing that in season, just so you can see what is the plant actually touching in that whole soil. As Reid said, tissue samples are super important in season. I have some growers that like to do them at bloom. Most of my growers like to do it at veraison. I like it when they do it at veraison. But that's really just a personal preference. It's easier. There's less pests to look for at veraison, so it's easier for me and our scouting team to get out and do tissue samples at that veraison timeframe. But both bloom and veraison tissue samples tell you a very interesting story about what is actually getting from the soil into the plant, and helps you make adjustments on like a foliar fertilizer program or potentially a ground fertilizer program, depending on if you're organic. There's more rules around that, but that's what your soil or your tissue samples are there to help you in season make adjustments, whether they're for a foliar or a soil. So yeah, we're doing a lot of soil sampling every year, tissue sampling every year, and using those to make decisions on fertilizer.
And so for that, for whether you pick bloom or veraison, do you recommend whatever you do, stick with consistently?
Yes, absolutely. Because that's going to tell you the more consistent story. Like it's all of these tests are just telling you part of the story of your vineyard site. And so having data from the relatively same time period, right? Like if you're normally taking your soil samples in November, it doesn't matter if you're taking them November 1st or November 15th every year. It just matters that you're taking them in November, or if you take them in March. A lot of growers that won't take soil samples until like March, because we do mostly liquid fertilizer. So we're not needing to put down dry fertilizer necessarily in the winter time. And so waiting until spring, waiting until next year's budget, I mean, does play a part in when those soil samples are taken. But yes, consistency in the general timing of those samples, whether they're soil or your bloom or veraison. If you're wanting to switch, like time frames of 1 year. So if you're doing bloom samples, you want to switch to veraison. Really the recommendation is for a couple years doing it over both times, so that you can track how those differences look on your site and then make the switch.
So typically, it sounds like we're doing a lot of soil, a lot of leaf. That's kind of known. But for the organic acid test, that's a little different. So do growers actually ask for that, or is that what you recommend them them do? How familiar are they with that kind of test?
So the growers that we work with that also have tree fruit are very familiar with the test. So talking to them about switching from a complete to a Ren is really not that hard because they understand that. It's a fun and interesting conversation to have with wine growers that are either new to Wilbur Ellis or don't have tree fruit because they may not know about that test. Like I said, I still run a lot of completes because that's what we have. We have scientific data showing that when our numbers are this on a complete, then they are this on, this is how much fertilizer you need to add. And so that's not with this organic extraction test. Like I don't have those numbers for grapes. And so I'm working through that. I still I got one vineyard that I work with where we're starting to incorporate this organic extraction, and we'll still do a complete soil sample every 3 years and do this organic extraction test annually so that I have both data points. And so, yeah, we're growing that knowledge base.
All right, then Kade, you can't say soil samples or leaf samples.
Okay,
Which is
so
why I picked him, because he has another one.
well, I've got a whole bunch here, and I need to preface it by saying, the way we really approach our vineyard is we really want to take a dynamic approach. These are not static systems. We really need to know and understand everything that is out there, and we rely a lot on remote sensing. So our kind of 3-tier approach is with anything is that we really want to make decisions based on, we want some type of theoretical data that we can look on. We want a predictive model. We want something to look at. Well, it takes a lot of samples of all sorts to build those models. But if we have a theoretical model to look at, a predictive model to look at, then we can actually field truth these things. We can go out and we can physically measure these things. Whether that's soil test, whether that's using a pressure bomb, whether that's running analytical chemistry on fruit. The third part of that is we've actually got to be out in the vineyard, right? And so we make a priority to run a 3-tier system in everything that we do. And so that means that we really are collecting data on everything. So we are soil moisture, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have one of the largest soil moisture databases in the United States. I would venture to say potentially in the world at this point for grapevines anyways. Stem water potentials, we're running pressure bombs, thousands and thousands and thousands of pressure bombs. Most of that is to truth and proof our models based on stem water potentials. We are looking at infiltration rates in soil. We are looking at soil depletion curves. We look at volumetric flow rates. We look at pressure differentials. We look at ambient temperatures, canopy temperature, delta T's in the canopies. The list goes on and on and on. But the point is that we cannot, for every action that we take in the vineyard, we are going to have a reaction somewhere else. So the mindset is know and understand the system as a whole and try to really hone in on the things that are gonna produce the best quality that we possibly can. And for us, largely outside of Mother Nature, it's typically irrigation is where you're gonna get your next best quality information. So we've spent decades and decades and decades working on irrigation delivery, looking at infiltration, depletion curves, and really trying to hone in all sorts of programs. And when we take a look at those infiltration rates and we're running a fertigation set, we know that, if we're percolating down, 12 inches, every 12 hours, we can stop that fertilizer exactly in the zone that we need that fertilizer at. We are not leaching things. We are not wasting product. We are being very thoughtful and very intentional on everything we do. If it's a spray program, we are learning and understanding about every single bug that we have out there. Its complete life cycle, its instars, what chemicals are available for it, whether that's organic chemicals, whether those are conventional chemicals. we'll do a complete SWOT analysis on every single insect, and we will absolutely know for sure that we are making the best decision instead of just relying on, hey, you know, farmer down the road uses this for that. Let's do it. Well, we can think a little bit outside the box. We can have better research, better data to put towards those types of models, and really be very diligent in thinking about every action that we're taking in that.
That's great. That's a lot. It's a lot of data.
I've got 4 more pages. I think people get bored.
Yeah. We'll have time for questions in a minute while we're just trying to figure out everything that they do, and then we'll open it up. So again, that's a lot of data. So what has been the most helpful data to have? And don't say all of it.
No, for us, by far, it's soil moisture and how we can really control the plant health, how we can control fertigation, fumigation principles, and overall quality. So we have set up, you know, over the last 8 years, we've worked on setting up 8 different machine learning models. So I've got several sections out in the vineyard that will irrigate themselves 100%. I don't have to touch them. The machine learning models are doing that. And those relate to very specific stem water potential readings where we can stress a row out in the test vineyard to a very specific bar, hold it at that, go in, harvest the fruit, run that analytical chemistry and see what we're getting. Are we getting increases in anthocyanins? Are we getting, you know, increases in tannins? What are the methoxypyrazines in there? And a whole host of other things. And so building tools like that have been really, really beneficial and really helpful because we work with so many people. We've got 54 individual blocks spread out across 120 acres. And on any one year, we're 35 to 40 different customers. And our intention is to farm the best we can for every single one of our customers.
Ow. So I'd say actually the team that I work with at Wilbur Ellis has been actually the most helpful for me as I build fertilizer programs. We've got a great operations team, multiple teams that run our fertilizer plants. And then I have teams that I can reach out to ask questions about different strategies we're using in other areas to improve plant health. And we've just got a lot of really knowledgeable people. From these different teams, I've started incorporating more humic acids in my fertilizers because the humic acid does a great job at helping to buffer around the root zone, that the pH, and making it so helping to chelate micronutrients that have been bound up in the soil by our really high 9 pHs that we have in a lot of our AVAs. It is not just Red Mountain and not just your vineyard on Red Mountain. And then incorporating more like kelp products when we're planting vineyards because kelp naturally has a lot of cytokinins in it and helps stimulate root growth. So there's a lot of these natural products that I've been able to start incorporating or having my growers incorporate using kelp as a foliar. It's not really a nutrient aid, but it's plant health aid. I get a lot of comments from growers the first time that they use it that, oh my gosh, these plants recovered from this heat event so much faster. Incorporating more calcium nitrate products as in fertilizer blends. We have a lot of calcium in our soils. Like when you guys start, there's a lot of students in the room. When you guys are vineyard managers or consultants and you start looking at our soil tests, you will see there is a lot of calcium in our soil. And like Reid said, we've got a lot of 9 pH soils. That's all bound up. And Devin said it too. We've got a lot of carbonates in our soil. Most of that calcium is bound up. And so when we start using more calcium, nitrogen-based fertilizers, we see really good responses in plant health because those plants finally have easy access to calcium. We know calcium helps build stronger cells, stronger berries, stronger leaves, better photosynthesis. So It's learning from people internal to Wilbur Ellis, I think has helped me really the most be a better crop consultant and help provide better advice to vineyard managers, vineyard workers. I will say that irrigation monitoring is super important. Kate's absolutely right. In places where I have growers that use irrigation monitoring systems, they're much better at placing fertilizer where it needs to go and making sure that the irrigation that they apply is at the right time in the right place.
Yep, absolutely. I will make one comment on the nutrition as well. Typically, when we're growing in pH, 8.6, 8.7, unlike many other crops, especially row crops, our most limiting, factor is not nitrogen. It is typically phosphorus as well, and most of that is almost completely bound up in our calcium carbonate. So that's it's a little bit different than other cropping systems. That's something that is very unique to grapes. But when we think of like the phospholipid backbones and DNA and ATP synthesis and those types of things, we are very limited in phosphorus.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 100% soil moisture probes are just awesome. They definitely are a great way to understand infiltration rate and kind of to Kate's point as well. Are you missing the target, right? We're investing all this money in fertilizers and to fertigate, and if you're missing the target, if you're kind of irrigating past that root zone, that's an issue. And I would venture to say many vineyard managers and growers out there are ripping out grapevines right now, right? So that's, in my opinion, one of the best ways to monitor that, right? Rip out that grapevine and see how deep are these roots, right? How do the roots even look, right? So I think that's also something to think about, and it's coming at it a little bit from a different angle. We're Hedges is very much we've got a bottling line, we've got a warehouse, everything. We got the vineyard, everything is right there, right? So I very much have to farm in the way that our winemaker wants things to be farmed. And so sometimes that can feel like, okay, well, I can see, maybe the pH should be here, but she's really liking how the wine's turning out, right? So it's in some ways I think there are things that need to be adjusted, but then in other ways, I kind of have to go with the flow because that's what's making money, right? It's something to think about too. So my approach is not necessarily using as much or as many different kind of fertilizers as I can, although my God, that's very tempting. And everybody will tell you this can do that can do this, and there's just a lot of information out there, and sometimes that can be a little bit overwhelming as kind of like a young farmer, right? Kind of growing up in this, it's like what do I use, right? I really want to fix this problem. The product says this. Should I just go ahead and use that? And fortunately enough, I don't really have the budget to do that anyways, right? So where I'm going to dive into is more in creating my own biodynamic preparations. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to step away from that certification, is because they're very strict on what these preps can be made of and how they can be made, right? So this past year, I spent a lot of time just kind of literally walking the roadways. I live on Red Mountain as well, so I spent a lot of time running on Red Mountain and just kind of seeing what's growing there, right? And so obviously rabbit brush is like, you just can't kill that, you know what I mean? You can literally spray that with herbicide, it kind of keeps going. Doesn't really need water. Very impressive to me, right? So so this year I'm going to be making a rabbit brush preparation, and then from there I'm going to be I'm going to take that to the lab. However I create this, I want to see what is the chemical makeup of this, right? What's in this, and then from there I'm going to try to apply that in ways that that kind of work with what I'm going to be seeing from the lab, right? So again, it's really just trying to use what I have and then following that up with some science, and that's where I think biodynamics is missing the boat a little bit, where there's just not, you could talk to the board and they kind of all have a different answer on what these preps do. And so this is going to be a bit of a chance for me to create my own preps and then to see what can I do with that. And, again, it's like, I think with the certifying bodies, if you do decide to farm organically or biodynamically or, ROC, whatever you want to call it, I strongly urge you just to look up what does that even mean, right? That there's a lot more to it than I think meets the eye. I think it's appealing to put that on the label, and I think that it's also very confusing to the consumer as well. So if you can find a way to sell the story, I would say go ahead and go for it. But also they're a bit of like a guideline, right? You can look up this information, and ROC is pretty great. Regenerative organic certification is pretty great because it is mandatory. I do have to go through a series of sampling for them, both visually, like do it yourself style, then also have to send a sample to a lab and see like what's actually going on in this soil, right? So I urge you guys to, if you're going to try to think about that, maybe just try it without getting certified and see like, hey, is it worth it? And then when you get into that pinch, when you do have those leaf hoppers, when you do have those great mealy bugs, come and talk to me. But really think through what the options are that you can use, right? And my thing is it's building that vine's immune system, right? And so I have to get that vine as healthy as I can because I know it's going to take a beating. I know it, and I have to allow that in some ways too. That's kind of part of who I am as a farmer, is accepting that I am going to have some crop loss. It's not going to look exactly perfect, but that's also part of the story that we're trying to share with Hedges, right? It's kind of trying to change this narrative of what is the vineyard block, right? And I think a large percentage of the time, it's a money suck, right? It really is. And so I'm trying to kind of change that narrative as best as I can. There's some other different projects that I'm working on too. One of them is an agroforestry project where we're going to be planting hybrid grape varietals within a pre-existing orchard that we have.
Great. Okay. So before I hand it over to the crowd, I have an off-script question for you guys, because there's got to be one. There's got to be one. But like, how many of you actually like think your soils are healthy? Yeah, right. You don't know, right? So typically, and that's why we have this whole LTAR is to figure out what are the indicators, at least for wine grapes, that might help us figure out if we have healthy soils. Typically, you hear in other cropping systems throughout the world, it's like, and you talked on this, which made me think of it, Reid, was we aren't necessarily equivalent to yield. So a healthy soil doesn't really mean that we're going to have a lot of grapes, because that's not what we're interested in. We're interested in quality too. And we also are working with high pHs, low carbon, but we still have really productive. I mean, these are Red Mountain grapes, right? Like these are premier grapes. So are our soils really bad? So for me, it's like, my question is, how do you know your soils are healthy? What does that look like for you?
Boy, I'm just, yes, no, but here's the thing, I'm thinking of this and like I do with everything as a whole system. I've got blocks from 1976, 1975 that are still producing at 4.5, 5 tons an acre. At that old, there's got to be some health that is associated with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be producing. They wouldn't be growing, cambial growth, secondary growth at the rate they're still growing at. When we look at our native reclamation project around the vineyard, we are over 30,000 native plants across our property, a little more than 30,000 at this point. When we see an increase in beneficial insect populations and an increase in parasitic wasps, when we put that whole entire picture together, I would say even at high pHs, even with low organic matter, absolutely, these are healthy soils. And it's our job to still protect those and be very intentional and very thoughtful in the way we do that.
No, you get it. I'm not losing this one too.
So I think part of what Kade's trying to say, and what I definitely say, is I'm looking at plant health as an indicator of soil health. And I think we see that in grapevines, even in really rough growing conditions. Like we would definitely not be able to grow corn well on Red Mountain in the conditions that we grow wine grapes. I mean, the definition of soil health that we saw a couple times today was broad for that reason. Like it's the health of the plant in that in that soil situation. And so I think all the three of us on this panel would agree that we're looking at soil health or plant health as an indicator of soil health for that plant. In my fertility programs, I'm focused on, especially with the humic acid, how do I change that soil chemistry just a little bit while that fertilizer's there interacting with the roots so that the roots can take up that fertility at that moment that they need it. Because with grapevines, we don't want uncontrollable growth. We want very focused growth when we as growers want them to grow, which I mean is part of controlling water, but it's also very much controlling the fertility, and being able to grow in these not so great soils helps us do that. But that doesn't mean that we don't want the plants to ever access that fertility that we're giving them. We want them to access it very well in a very concentrated period. So focusing on plant health as an indicator of soil health is what I'm looking for. How green are the leaves? How big are the berries? Like how fast is it growing in between different phases? How well is it responding to deficit irrigation? How well is it bouncing back after we're done deficit irrigating?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah, it's, I think, looking, and that's why I kind of go back to, people are ripping out grapevines, and that's like kind of the way to see kind of what's kind of going on underneath the soil, so to speak, without really, having to be too drastic with it because you're already ripping out those grapevines, right? So I'd also venture to say that if farming is being done, then it is not healthy soil, to be honest with you, right? I think that it is a moving target, and I think that, if we were farming sagebrush, then I think we could probably find an equilibrium with the soil where it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. We don't need to have human input in it. But because we have grapevines on that soil or corn or whatever it is, it's going to have to be constantly manhandled and manipulated. And I think that's just the way it's got to be. So it's a little bit of a going back into the industrial age and kind of the creation of farming in a way. And I think that a lot of that has to be undone. And I also think that, just looking at Red Mountain, there's just been a lot of, I guess, just farming in general, there's been a lot of change with what's been acceptable, right? With what we put on our crop. And I would say change in a good way. But when you have years and years of putting on very heavy chemicals, of course that earth is going to remember that. And I think it's silly to think that it wouldn't. So with that being said, it's again, I think, using what you have and understanding that this is something that you're going to have to kind of keep propping up. You're going to have to keep at it. It's not just, and that's where I think the monitoring is so critical, because again, it is a moving target. You don't have it solved. And again, when you think you have it solved, probably don't.
So I don't know about you guys, but that brings a lot of questions. What do you guys have so far for these guys? You can't not have questions.
We have a couple of questions on Zoom.
I figured there would be a bunch
We
online.
can start with those. The first is, do you know if anyone is trying out the moisture retaining gel or powders?
I do not.
No. Question done. Next.
All right, next question. For the two growers, what does your soil moisture monitoring look like? Especially what depths and how often? And how did you come up with the design you have?
So for us, we're at, I've got 54 individual blocks. Every single block has a soil moisture sensor in it that we're measuring from 0 inches down to 48 inches, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I've got historical data for the past 17 years. So huge database on that. What we have done, we have moved these sensors. We haven't just put them in the ground and said, hey, that's where it's going to stay. We have really tried to hone in and find the most representative spot in that particular block to place these things. But that doesn't mean where it needs to stay. Over 10 years, we've had hard caliche layers that have precipitated out and decomposed and is now gravel, and the water dynamics are different. That probe is not representative of that block in that location anymore. We probably need to choose a new spot. So again, it's a dynamic system. Things are always moving. We treat them as such and not as static.
What's that?
0 inches to 48 inches.
Do not have that many soil moisture probes. I wish I did. And I'd say a good thought on that. I'm super stoked that Kade's right next door, guys, because I can literally go and talk to him and ask him and like look at what he's doing. So I appreciate that he's got that many. I could go over and check out what he's got going on. Not all of us have a neighbor like Kade. We've got 10 soil moisture probes. They were put in before me. I don't necessarily agree with the locations they were put in. And our depths are from 0 to 4 feet. And that's 24/7. And obviously, in the growing season, I will be checking that regularly, more on top of that. And kind of now in the off season, it's just recording it, and I could look back to see how are we going to start our season. If I could redo it, I would probably have more soil moisture probes, and then probably have them in a little bit of just different areas of the blocks, right? I'd like to have some in where I can see that EC value is pretty high, and some where it's kind of low, and then I'd like to kind of test that, see what is the infiltration rate as well. But again, it's about 10, and I would say without that, it'd be very, very challenging. I kind of came from Southern Oregon, and before that Napa, and in particular in Southern Oregon, we just had a lot of water going on there, right? So all that was just visual cues. As soon as I came into Red Mountain, that's what everyone told me, is you're going to be spending about 90% of your time irrigating. 100% right. That's true. And so with that, I really like to look at my watering and my fertilizer a little bit of like the gas and brakes, right? It's like sometimes we need to speed it up, sometimes we need to slow it down. And as soon as you cut that water off, it is very, very noticeable. So it's, again, Red Mountain is just it's an easy place to grow with all kind of the issues that are there. I can see why so many people have gravitated to growing over there. But again, it's all irrigation.
So with the moisture sensors, we hear from some growers that, they're expensive. It's hard to get a lot in there, especially with the data plans. Are there alternatives to moisture sensors? Or if there's not, what do you recommend for them if they can, afford one or two, put them in maybe the extremes of their fields or the main fields? What do you recommend for that?
Well, I would say, if you get soil moisture sensors, absolutely, they are expensive, because you've got to have a system behind them to generate your depletion curves. If you don't have soil moisture sensors, then a great inexpensive alternative to that is doing leaf water, stem water potentials. Get a pressure bond, and you can go out and measure leaf water, stem water potential if you want to relate that to plant stress. Those are more economical. If you've got a neighbor, team up with a neighbor, go in together. You can share the equipment around on a small piece of equipment like that. As far as placement if you were just going to put a couple, I would try to pick the most representative places across your vineyard or across the block that they're going to go in.
So another option, if you can't afford soil moisture probes, is just a shovel.
Yep.
And doing a soil ribbon. For those of you who have not done that before, if you take a handful of soil, get it moist, and then see how far you can make a ribbon with it. And then there's charts that will tell you how much sand, silt, and clay approximately is in that. And then you can, use that to know what your soil type is, and then how much water you've got in that, depending on how easy it is to actually make that ribbon. Also, how, wet it is.
NRCS has a great resource for that, their soil texture feel method. So if you Google that, it'll tell you all how to do it.
Yeah, so that's a really great, inexpensive way. So the soil moisture probes that we use, or that we lease out to our growers at Wilbur, Ellis, we actually have a handout that is basically that chart that's on NRCS's website that shows them different soil colors and how to do that soil moisture ribbon, so that as the irrigators are out in fields, if it looks like one of their soil moisture probes isn't is maybe acting up. They can do a quick ribbon test, see what that soil moisture is, and then what it's showing on their soil moisture probe to kind of troubleshoot that.
Yeah, I'd say similar to what Catherine's saying. Yeah, it's I'm a big just go out and scout, right? You know, are those tendrils burning off? You know, what are the shoot tips looking like? Which way are the leaves facing, right? It's just kind of using those visual cues are pretty critical over many acres. That can be challenging, right? Because you really have to catch irrigation pretty quick, especially on Red Mountain or really kind of wherever you are. I would also say reach out to your local extension office, right? They have a lot of great resources and can literally teach you and help you for like how do I scout, right? And they may know people with pressure bombs, or they might even have a pressure bomb that you might be able to use. And I'll say that, you know, a pressure bomb costs around $3,000. So maybe kind of going in with a partner might be a good idea. But if that's all I had, that would be more than enough, just that pressure bomb, right? It really is tried and true. And again, there's a lot of literature and research on that and what numbers to look for. And I'd also advise do not blanket things, right? You know, your Syrah is going to be different than your Grenache, is going to be different than your Cabernet Sauvignon. As fun and as easy as it is to say we're going to put on, you know, a quarter acre inch on everything, just try to, again, look at that, right? And also looking at your topography will also kind of give you a little bit of a clue of where these dips are and maybe what that different soil series is as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we got a couple questions coming in, and it was kind of what I had asked earlier too for you guys is what challenges do you have with collecting data and using that to interpret your results for healthy soil?
So I'd say the biggest challenge is that, at least for what I see, is that growers can't always change something in a field. Like once the field's set up, there's not a whole, depending on obviously the field size, there may not be multiple irrigation zones. And the zone that you want to manipulate, like you may not be able to. Like you may have like a patch. Reid just talked about how you might have dips in a block. Well, that dip is going to hold water different than the top of the hill. And so going back to where do you place the soil moisture sensor, and Kate's comment, you got to do it in the most representative spot of the field. What you have to think about with that is how are you going to, what spot are you going to irrigate to? Because there's going to be changes in soil across the block. And if the majority, if you have 3/4 of your block is one soil type, then you probably want to put your soil sensor in that because you're going to water for that soil type versus the smaller soil type that you have in your field. So I think for me, the biggest challenge I see for growers is being able to manage across a block that's got multiple one or more soil series in it that are causing different conditions across that block.
I would say budget's a big factor, and kind of the infrastructure, right? So at Hedges we have a 40-year-old irrigation infrastructure. 40 years ago, they had a different idea of what was efficient and what wasn't efficient, and still even the drip hose is 40 years old in certain areas, right? So if that's not a challenge, I don't know what is. You put on 24 hours, you'll see a pancake size, water thing, and then over here you'll see a quarter. That's a little bit of an issue. Now, granted, I do have 40-year-old vines, so they can kind of buffer it pretty good. But I'd say that's a bit of an issue for me. And then also, again, just a lot of information, right? It's just, I'm kind of like a one-man band, so I kind of have to do everything from HR to the viticulture side of things, to just giving tours around Hedges sometimes too. So finding the time to synthesize all this data that I'm collecting, it's just another thing that I would advise is just be careful with how much monitoring you're doing. It's very relevant and very important. But at the end of the day, if I need to get the crew in, or I need to do a spray, or we have a mildew outbreak or something, I gotta stop it, and I gotta go to that problem, right? So it's just doing the best you can to see the challenges ahead in the season, and a lot of that too is just by using those observational skills, and then also just having like a little bit of like a notebook, right? So you know what's coming for you, so that you can allow yourself time to focus on the things that matter, right?
Yeah, I think for us, our missing link as far as data goes is probably the soil science component. When we think about soil as a static system, it's not. It's very dynamic. It's changing all the time, and there's no really good way, and we don't really know enough on how to measure these things. We can take a cavity ring down spectrometer at $200,000 an acre and try to measure. That is so cost prohibitive. It's not going to work. Kansas State right now is working on nanoscale moisture or not moisture probes, but nanoscale measurement devices for NPKs, those types of things that would literally scatter out millions of these across a soil horizon, soil profile. That technology is not here yet. We really need those. If we're looking at remote sensing technologies, those types of things, we're probably, a solid decade out. Colorado State University and UC Berkeley are both working on some sensors right now. They're about the, size of a quarter roll, $10 a pop. Sounds pretty good, but boy, you're going to need a lot of them. And so that's a lot of data loggers. That's a lot of, data storage. And then of course, my winter time is usually, data synthesis. So that's building models and stuff like that. So we can make time to do that. But really being able to measure anything in the soil in a very dynamic way is kind of our data missing link.
So we have a question for you is, with all of your soil moisture data, is it just you that analyzes it, or do you have a team that helps you?
No, it's just me. I'm by myself. So we typically we run a small crew. We kind of operate on a Bordeaux principle. One for workers. That's one person per 10 acres, and then it's myself. So typically it's just myself doing that. Now, because this data is actual physical data, it can be displayed very easily. So I can, if I want to look at models or if I want to look at trends, I can go in, I can download CSV files, I can run regression models, I can do all sorts of stuff with that. We are set up to do it that way, but yeah, it's myself.
So how do you not scare off someone who can't do all that?
Well, it's hard, right? No, but I mean, you learn. I didn't go to school to do this. I learned how to do it. And I'll tell you, if I can learn how to do it, anybody can.
So we have one for Catherine. You mentioned that plant health is an indicator of soil health. What if you have bare soils? We hear that bare soils kind of are not healthy soils because they cause erosion and loss of nutrients. So would you still consider, even if you see a healthy plant, that soil is healthy?
So we have a lot of places where they're very sandy soils. I work with a vineyard out in the Pasco area that, we could not grow a cover crop if we tried. Like it is sand out there. And those plants grow great. We are very careful with our fertilizer timing and placement. They water a lot more than like these guys on Red Mountain that have more substance to their soil. So in that situation, yes, I still consider, it's sand, it's got nothing in it. It's an organic matter of like 0.001. But for those grapevines, because of how that grower knows how to farm their land, I would consider that healthy for those plants. If it was a different grower that came and took over that farm, I think those vines would then show that they weren't being taken care of in the same way. And then in that case, that would be a less healthy environment for them.
Reid, you look like you're itching to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it was directed at her. If plants are indication of soil health, and you have a bare soil, is that a healthy soil? still?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I'm very much conflicted on tillage, and I'd say the owners of Hedges have a certain idea of what a nice vineyard looks like, right? So I kind of have to abide by that in some ways. But so this year we're going to be attempting cover cropping underneath the vines, and what I've been reading is the crop is going the crop load is going to lower within kind of like these first 3 years, and then will kind of have a little bit of an equilibrium and kind of work its way back up. And so I really feel that with kind of with nature in general and with in particular a vineyard block, a lot of times as a farmer I will see something, whatever that might be, a weed or maybe some issue that I'm seeing in the vineyard, and a lot of times I want to react, and I want to react pretty heavily. I want it to be gone. I don't want to see this problem anymore. And I'll say that some of the best things that I've done is kind of nothing, right? And so I really do believe that by kind of stepping away from the vineyard, obviously still monitoring it, but stepping away from it, I believe that all the natural processes of just life going on, they're not disturbed, right? Just even sending a crew in a vineyard is disturbing the vineyard, right? So in my opinion, if we could step away from tillage, if we could step away from bare earth, I really think on all fronts, especially carbon sequestering carbon, I think that we can make a pretty big step with that. And again, it really does matter the vine age, right? If you've got a baby block, if you're just planting, you have to ask yourself, do I want to kind of struggle through this? When do I want to have fruit? Just ask these questions. So I'd say think of your goal first and then kind of work back from that.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the issues that we have, because we have vineyards are unique. They're weeds. They can grow anywhere. So you have like a completely sand soil, and yet we're still getting production. And there's not, how much can you alter the sand soil to try and make it healthy? So it's like, what does that look like for our systems? It's really hard. And maybe Devin and I will have an answer for you. Who knows? Give us 5 more years. We'll see. Yeah. So there's that. Corinne, you said there was another question.
Yes, another one on Zoom. It might be another quick one. Would a moisture probe for volumetric water content be recommended for field testing?
For what?
Would a moisture sensor for volumetric water content be
Recommended
recommended
for field
for
testing.
So just for testing what?
Yeah.
For testing. So basically moisture. Yeah, I think they're asked because moisture sensors do test for soil volumetric water content. So yes, just yes.
Yes.
Yes. If we understand them, I think it's a yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from our audience? Students? Yeah, go ahead.
How much of what you're testing for and sampling would change if you were in a much rainier, much more clay heavy soil?
All of it.
All of it.
It'd be a whole new program.
So clay soils hold water way better than our soils do here. And so I think moisture monitoring would be very different because we wouldn't have such quick decline curves. We'd have much slower, we'd probably be watering once a year and hoping that we could get our vines to stop growing to get the quality that we want. I think that's really a pillar of growing grapes in Eastern Washington is that we have such sandy soils so that we have almost total control of our water.
Yeah, the ability to manipulate it. Reid, now you were on the western side, right? So what was your rain content then? How was managing those sites?
Yeah, so we'd get. I also farmed in kind of Napa and Sonoma as well, so a little bit more drier over there. But in Southern Oregon, we'd get maybe 25 inches of rain a year, and really completely different. You're really just kind of waiting to see symptoms to say, okay, or like whether that be stress or dehydration, whatever that might be, symptoms before you're kind of turning on that water. And in many cases, just kind of dry farming, right? So you're just kind of literally just letting the vine do what it wants to do. And that's why I go back to saying kind of the gas and brakes with fertilizer and water, especially on Red Mountain, we have that, we can do that, right? But if you're in one of these areas where you just have a lot of rainfall, a lot of precipitation, it's even more so kind of out of your hands, right? So then again, you're really, in my opinion, I would say focusing on roots. I think rootstock, it would be more of a help for that and trying to kind of devigorate a little bit. And again, on Red Mountain, coming to Washington was the first time I've ever farmed own rooted vines, and they can buffer heat and stress like no other. And so I would say, depending on where you are, really looking into rootstocks and trying to understand what can they do for you can kind of be a way to kind of help mitigate just that much water. And again, because that's what Southern Oregon was, everything that I farmed had rootstock, right? And we didn't really even have phylloxera over there. There's some small outbreaks, but not really.
Any other questions? Any other questions? I'm just kidding, Julie.
Liz, and I was gonna buy you a beer. Not anymore.
Here, have all the questions you want.
Okay, a question for Catherine.
Mhm.
I know how to pick an appropriate lab. You know how to pick an appropriate lab. I know how to tell whether the lab is gonna give me quality results or not. A lot of growers don't know how to determine whether or not they're gonna get quality results from a lab and don't know how to pick a lab. So what criteria should they use?
Picking a local lab is really important. I would not ever recommend someone send soil samples if you farm in Washington State, pick a lab in Washington State. If you farm in Eastern Washington, pick a lab in Eastern Washington. A big part of that is phosphorus test. There are 3 different phosphorus tests that are done, and depending on where you are in the country, depends on what phosphorus tests that the lab will run for you. Here in Eastern Washington, our labs should be, they run Olsen P. And that test is the right one for us to do because of how much bicarbonates we have in our soil. It'll give you an actual number of phosphorus that's available to your plants. If you send your samples to the Midwest, they run the Bray test, which doesn't take into account the bicarbonates in our soil, and so you get the wrong number. And there's not some kind of chart that says if your Bray number is this and their Olsen P is this. So I have had to have people retest using a local lab because they had this weird Bray phosphorus number that I couldn't do anything with. So picking a local lab is very helpful. There are national standards that labs can, they do internal testing and then send those results to this national lab, which then verifies that they're doing everything right. So most labs will say that they follow those standards. If they do, there are several really good labs in Washington, in Eastern Washington. And if you get data that looks funny, if you ask them to, they will rerun it. The trick is to ask them within like 2 or so weeks because you have to realize that you are not the only farm that is sending whatever lab your samples. So these labs that we have get thousands of soil samples, I mean, sometimes a day, depending on what time of year it is. And so they don't have storage space for all of these soil samples. So most labs have like a 2 or 3 week shelf life for a certain soil. But if they don't have your soil or they don't have enough anymore of your soil to retest what you're asking them to retest, then most are fine. If you send them in your sample, they will not charge you extra for that. So knowing, I guess, having historical data of your site also helps when you get your new data and you're looking at that, you're like, whoa, like why all of a sudden is my potassium number 1,000 when last year it was 250 and we didn't add any potassium? Like something happened here. Yeah. But I have seen weird numbers like that where the farm had used compost and that's a very loose term, like it was more dairy, like straight out the lagoon type thing. Where we had you can't, I mean, when you're sticking a soil probe in the ground, you're not seeing the whole 12 inches or whatever you're taking very easily sometimes. And so, I mean, I had a soil sample this year come back with 1,000 parts of potassium, and last year it was not. Instead of having the lab rerun that, I just went with the number from last year because that field had been treated with a lot of dairy manure over a long period of time. So my assumption was that we'd hit a chunk. And so sometimes that's why you see weird numbers, is because of how the soil had been treated in the past. That doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just might look a little weird because of past practices. But labs, I guess my point is labs are usually very happy to retest something for you if you think the data looks weird. But using a lab that's close to home is probably the best advice that I can give you.
Yeah, and I would also say just kind of, you know, if you don't have the experience to discern, like, hey, that's a weird number, that's not a weird number, call them, right? That's something that I'll do, is literally just call the lab and say, what makes this magnesium? Why is this below what you're saying, good or bad, right? And a lot of times you'll get decent answers, but that's my suggestion. Just call the lab. Where are you guys getting these numbers? And also talk through the process of what they're doing. That's another one. And then the other thing, not a knock on bringing in an agronomist, but sample it yourself. Do it yourself, right? Call them. How do I do this sample, right? What are the tools that I need? What are the sanitation protocols that I need to do? How do I ship it to you? How quick do I need to ship it to you? All these things really affect that sample. So it's just trying to, in my opinion, trying to get it there as quick as you can. And to Catherine's point, a closer lab is important. Not being from Washington, that took me a little bit of time to understand what are those good labs, which are the ones that I could use. So I've had to lean a little bit on my friends on Red Mountain to figure that out.
Just a quick follow-up to that. It is also very important to pay attention to good samples, because sometimes false positives happen. They happen on a very regular basis, especially if we're doing foliar applications. So if you're doing tissue analysis, make sure you're coupling those results with your soil analysis. So if they're both high, you probably have, high amounts. If they're both low, you probably have low amounts. If they're mixed, I would be looking at a false positive of one of those. So that happens all the time. We just need to make sure that we are sending clean samples in. We don't go out, do a foliar spray at 95 degrees, have it evaporate on a leaf, and everything is now stuck to the leaf. We pull that leaf off, we send it to the lab, and by gosh, we are just looking good because our numbers are fantastic. So that happens all the time. We just need to be timing. Timing is everything.
So look for local or within your region, check the accreditation. Some of them have it. Some of them don't have it anymore, but they still follow those standard protocols. So check on that, and then be your own advocate. So know what your soils are and remember those numbers from each sample. And if you see that it's off, that it's pretty dramatic off, ask for a rerun. All right. Any other questions?
Do I get another one?
Yes, absolutely. How many do you want?
I have one for Kade. I'm just gonna go down the line. I have one for Kade. So Kade, you're extremely data driven, as am I. However, I am hearing people in the rooms breathing very panicky about the amount of data that you collect and how they could possibly not fall into the problem of data overload. So what do you say to people about how you don't fall into the trap of data overload where you no longer can interpret?
To take a break and get out in the vineyard, right? That is just as important. There's times where we just have to set this stuff down. There's when in these models and the data interpretation, it takes a long time. It is monotonous, it's tedious, but you will find a way to get it done when those things are important. However, you have to take a break. You have to go out in the vineyard. Again, kind of our 3-tier system is, looking at the theoretical stuff, looking at actual information, and then boots on the ground. Go out. If you need a break, take a break. Yes. I mean, this stuff for us didn't happen overnight, right? This is, 20, 30 years worth of working on stuff like this. So yeah, absolutely. And there's been plenty of breaks.
And it goes back to fundamentals. What do you feel in your soil moisture? What do you see? How is it looking? Is it matching your data? Yeah, no, she wants you to go down the line. Yeah.
I think it's there's a lot of information, and I also think that it's really important to understand what are your problems, and that's where you start, right? And if you don't understand your problems, then you're probably not the best farmer, in some ways. So I think it's just kind of like understanding your farm, and then from there, it's like, yes, you can have all this information on a million different topics, but which one of these is really going to help you out the most? Look for that low-hanging fruit, attack that first, and then many times once you focus on that, that kind of offshoots into a lot of other different things that you might need to know or need to monitor, right? So just kind of follow what's interesting to you would be my suggestion.
Quick follow-up, just because it can be a little daunting on data collection and stuff, but typically when we're thinking about these things, the reason why we're doing what we're doing, and I think this is very important to talk about, is that when we talk about things like heat spikes, heat domes, freeze events, all those types of things, we've all dealt with those. We all have information about those. The challenge lies in that they all come at different timing, different intensities, different durations. And so what we're trying to do through data collection and data-driven science is that we are building a multitude of tools for our toolbox, and so we can make decisions faster in the field. We can make decisions as far as like phenological decisions, sometimes 2-3 weeks ahead of when we normally could. When it comes to yield estimations with certain data sets, we can go in months ahead of time and start looking at theoretical calculations. So there is no stop in progress. The logistics are much more free flowing. Our efficiency increases, and we're really able to adapt and respond a lot faster by looking at these things. And so I think that's a very important reason why we collect so much of this data.
Julie, what other question do you have?
I have one for Reid.
Okay, great. Go.
What's my favorite color?
Purple.
Close, red.
Okay. Right.
So Reid, you use a pressure bomb?
Yeah.
Which, I did in graduate school. It's very easy if you turn the pressure up too quickly to get a bad reading. So what advice do you have for folks who might be interested in a pressure bomb? And what online resources could they perhaps go look for so that they're doing it correctly?
I think that training is very important, and so I will call I'll call the people that make the device and literally talk through how do I use this, because another thing too is there's a lot of times you will get false readings on that too, right? So I believe practice makes perfect, but again, YouTube can be your best friend, and so I'd say try to find as many videos as you can. I really enjoy talking with Marcus Keller. I think that he's got a lot of great information specifically on pressure bombs. And so literally you can email him. I just did it the other day and he responds right away. So reach out to him, and there's a lot of information about how to use it, when to use it. And again, that changes from what Solar Noon is here in Washington. Eastern Washington was a little bit different than when I was in Napa, right? So just where you're located on the earth matters. And again, there are different types of kind of pressure bombing that you can do, literally in the middle of the night or kind of during the zenith of the sun. So I'd say trying to understand the instrument is pretty critical. And it's like kind of, back to the practice makes perfect. It's just like kind of the more times you do it, the more, if you're consistently off on a number, sometimes that can help too, because this is where I'm making that mistake. And then also looking at just different varietals too. It can be very deceiving if you're getting a certain number for your Syrah and then you're seeing another number for your Cab Sauv, it's like they're both gonna react differently. And again, Marcus Keller has a great some great literature out on, it's like kind of like he kind of talks about vines being like optimists, pessimists a little bit too. And so I would say understanding your grape varietal, and then also understanding the phenology. I'd say pressure bombing is critical to understand the phenology of your grapevine and knowing how is that maturing, because you really do want different numbers at different stages throughout the season.
Any other questions from anyone else?
Question.
Great.
And it can be addressed for either of you, but what are some soil health practices that a viticulture student should be focusing on now that can kind of help prepare us for where the industry is headed, like the next decade?
I think on the grower end of things, right, and we're really looking more towards sustainability models, salmon safe models, those types of things. I would dig into that literature, get familiar with what, you know, what they're going to be requiring. You know, not only on the viticulture side, but you're going to have winemakers come to you and say, hey, why are you not certified? And you need to be ready for that. And so I think as long as you're familiar with those practices and are looking into those and know how to respond to those, I think that's a really good place to start right now for sure.
So we talked a lot about water monitoring, and there's a lot of good systems out there. And there's a lot of good systems that the data is really hard to read. So what I would say is when you go to different trade shows, stop at the different soil moisture monitoring companies and ask them to see what the data looks like. Ask them to show you how to read it. So I think there's some, especially if you go to a vineyard that's already got a water monitoring system in place that they've been using for a long time, the owners like it, they're not going to change. Being comfortable then calling that company and saying, I don't know how to read this. I need you to tell me how to do this. I think that would help make you more comfortable than looking at that data. Because I mean, I think the guys up here would agree with me that their water moisture data can be very hard to interpret. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Kate said it could teach you a lot too, 100%. And you know, I'd also say it's, you know, I really, I don't come from a university background. So I was a professional soccer player before this, and you know, I think that kind of gives me a little bit of a different perspective on just like what matters and what doesn't matter. And so, you know, I would just kind of urge you to obviously pay attention to what you're learning if it's to the students, right? But also in some ways kind of like throw that away. And like something that I learned from Kade early on is just go into the vineyard and pretend like you don't know anything, right? And try to relook at it. It's like, sure, I know the crew's going to two bud this. I want, you know, 9 to 10 spurs, but like, why do I want that, right? Just because the row spacing's telling me that? Like, what's the actual, like, what's the vine telling me, right? So I think it all goes back to like paying attention to like going out in the field and being out in that field. And then please try hybrids, guys. You know, like we really have to change that. These varieties that we use and we have here today are because we brought them here today through pesticides and through fertilization, right? I really think we can believe that we can create almost like an American flavored wine, not like a Merlot or a Cab or one of these other types, right? So just try to push that. And again, I'm a big I like to experiment and just do a couple rows, do a block, and trying to find people around you that are as equally excited to try new things. Things can really just blow wide open for you, right? So just trying to find those people that have that passion and also not being afraid to try new things, I think is really really important. And also talk to these old ass farmers, you know, go out and, you know, to like some of the people that grow corn or, you know, just go out and talk to them, you know, they know a lot. We can put that out, my bad. But yeah, that's my thought.
I mean, that's what I'm doing, so. Other questions? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Does any of your data, the standards for what you want your data to, like what your soil what you want your soil to be? Let's say you're from a water and your soil moisture. Has that standard changed as the climate has changed as well? Like, is that you're okay with a little bit less soil moisture because it's so hot outside or vice versa?
Yeah, so I think, really, the more we learn about it, and I think probably the most useful thing to me is that depletion curve. And it's really that tail end of that depletion curve and how long we can push that out. How much stress can we get on that plant without seeing adverse effects? The more we data collect, the more we look at these things, we realize that, we can push things. We can push things a little bit more. We've been able to actually reduce our water use in blocks, sometimes by 30%, sometimes by 70%. And that's pretty unreal. Grapevines don't use a lot of water anyways, but when we can drop it even more, we have a lot tighter control, on berry growth and development. We were looking at things like stopping mitotic cell division and really, looking at, what is the berry volume? What are those berry weights? What is the canopy doing? Where's the irrigation going? I mean, these are dynamic systems and they absolutely change. The more that we collect and know and understand, then we can start coupling that also with environmental conditions. Okay, what do these depletion curves look like when it's cloudy out? What about if it's smoky out? What if it's 105 or if it's 115 for one day or a heat dome? How do those dynamics change? And every time we go through something like that, we learn more. So yes, they change all the time, but we learn from that and we know how to adapt to those things as well. So they will tell you a lot. You can learn a lot about just, is it free water that is just free to evaporation if it's above field capacity? So you might have evaporation only. If we start getting down into soil moisture at field capacity, we have the ability for evaporation of just free water. We have evapotranspiration coming in. We can learn things about our soil profile where down at 48 inches, we might dry down all season, but we get nighttime replenishing. So we, through capillary action, can actually see that water refilling up into those upper profiles. And those are things we wouldn't really know about the vineyard if we didn't have this type of technology out there.
Okay. Any other questions? Devin.
So this is for Reid. As you've been establishing native plants in your vineyard, what have been some of the challenges with getting them established? It's not really a data-driven question, but it is a kind of strong style question.
Some of the photos that we saw for the cover crop that didn't look so good, I'm seeing some of that, I'll be honest with you. I would say timing is just kind of wild. It's like you really have to be on it with your timing. And I would say, because of that, I really wanted to see, and I did some trials where I did kind of like we did some, we seeded maybe last November, and then we also went really right into January. We just did some seeding just kind of literally like a month ago. And so for me, it's really kind of seeding, like the rate, calibrating, those things can be kind of challenging, especially with native seed, just because of how tiny they are, right? So it's kind of, my issue is that I just don't have enough, like I can't irrigate my tractor rows. And so I believe that, with these, I've done a two species mix. I believe that the native seed, it's just time, it's just patience, right? I think that this first year is going to be a little bit rough. I'm seeing some seeds breaking, I am seeing some grass kind of growing. And then with my clovers, I think that was something that was, I think we came in maybe a little bit too late with that. And then also I kind of trialed, do I disc this out? Do I prep this bed, or do I just drill this in? I tried hand seeding. I kind of did all these different types of trials, and from what I could see, the best take, I would say, was when I did till, right, and then I did come in with that no-till seed, and I'm seeing some pretty good take with that. But a lot of that really remains to be seen. Some of this This winter has been, I would say, mediocre. You know, I wish we did get a little bit more rain, and I did get some emergence. I think again a little bit too early on, so I am seeing some burn, right? But still, it looks like at like the base, I'm still seeing some green growing, right? So we'll see with that, and then I'm going to be bringing in sheep, which is also going to be its own thing. I just seeded, now they're going to eat all my you know what I planted. So I think a little bit of that is maybe we could answer that better in a year or so. Fingers crossed that that it works. But I'd love to talk with you after. We got some questions for you too.
Oh, so it seems like you're having to do a lot of things at once to bring this vineyard back from where it is now to where you want and bring it to where you want it to be. And you're going to make a lot of changes all at once. So how are you going to know which of those changes are actually moving the needle?
Great question. So really I spend a lot of my time, unfortunately, recording what I'm doing, right? Because it's so much stuff. Did I see that row, or did I see this row? Did I do every other row? I mean, there's just if we're just talking about seeding, and it's kind of just like the whole grazing plan, all these types of things that I'm trying to incorporate all together. It's I'm a strong believer in just like throwing everything that you can at it, but really in a thoughtful way where you can't go wrong with native plants ever. There's not a situation that I've ever seen where you can go wrong with it. And I also think that if you can take the time to really to monitor these things, and that's what I'm doing now, is I'm just literally spending time walking the fields in these off months to see like what's working and what's not. And then again, it's like I'm really my main push for these cover crops, yes, is for the soil, but also I'm really trying to bring in beneficial insects, and I'm wanting them to stay, right? And if you were to look at the beneficial insects, I think Dr. James, David James, I believe is his name, he's got a lot of interesting information out there on beneficial insects. The sad news is we don't have a lot of like native beneficial insects. We got some, but not as many as maybe I saw down in Southern Oregon and in my Napa days as well. So I think, again, it's going to be a wait and see type thing. And I'm also a bit of a pessimist, where part of me thinks none of these things are going to work, right? And so I'm also going into this with that thought of failure first. I do believe in failure, and not just like, okay, we did it should work. No, we are probably going to have to reseed. I am going to have to relook at what seed I even put in the ground. And then also, as far as kind of monitoring and looking at the soil samples, it's really challenging, right? Because it's like I do want to put on like soil amendments. I think that'd be awesome. But talking around the mountain and also looking at the data, I would have to put on so much, right? So much sulfur, so much gypsum to help me out, right? And I just don't quite know if that's the answer. So a lot of it is very limiting to literally the funds that I have. And so that's where Benton County's been super helpful, just to kind of help me out with just getting that seed in, right? And then with the sheep process, that's going to be one too, where we'll see how that goes. I'm kind of more worried about them actually eating stuff on eating the grapevines than anything. But again, I do think that trialing, starting super small, right? That's all this is. It's 43 acres. It's not 105 acres. And the sheep are going to be on specific blocks that I've already done some soil sampling beforehand to see, is this going to work, right? So starting small, keep it focused. And again, I know it seems like a lot, but that's really what I enjoy about organic, biodynamic, this type of farming, is you cannot have one answer. You need to have multiple answers. And then again, you do need to trial. You need to see, is this working?
Any other questions? None, Julie?
Oh, I could go on, but I won't.
All right.
I'll wait till the.
Yeah, yep, we'll allow you guys to talk. So we have one last question. Would you be open to student interns shadowing you for a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that was yeses from all of them for any students that are in the crowd. Great, thank you so much.